It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. If you were just tuning in, you were tuning in at the perfect time on the perfect day. We are in the midst of our nonprofit series. Every year, this is our 5th consecutive year that from Thanksgiving through New Year's, we host a series of nonprofit leaders. It has become a very important mission to me that during the holidays, it's the time to give and receive. And if we can here at Her Success Story, as well as at Slater Success, have an opportunity to highlight ways that we can give forward. Giving isn't always about money. Giving is sometimes of the heart, of themselves, of energy, of volunteering, and education. So today, it thrills me to introduce you to 2 dynamic women and an incredible organization. The organization is called Homecoming Farm. That's right, Homecoming Farm. It resides in Long Island, New York. And our first guest, yes, we have 2 guests today representing Homecoming Farm, is Elizabeth Keihmis. Elizabeth is the executive director. She sees her role as the mission of Homecoming Farm supporting the belief that the human and natural world is one community of life. Responsibilities include community outreach, organic farming, grant writing, CSA management, educational programming, and fundraising. Elizabeth is one busy woman. She's joined by one of her board members, Jody Gangloff-Kaufmann. She is a senior you know what, Jody? I am not going to mess up your introduction here. I'm going to say, help me. You are a doctor of entomology. Help me, Jody.
Yeah, I'm an entomologist.
And entomologist. And you have a Ph.D. and this is the study of
insects. So primarily, I am in the business of helping people with problems with insects. And that is what the extension part is, bringing science to people.
And your involvement with Homecoming Farms, you're a chairperson of the board, which I love. You've been part of Homecoming Farms since 2014. And you're also affiliated with New York State IPM Program at Cornell University. It's a couple of very, very smart and brilliant women who are leading this mission. So Elizabeth, as the executive director, can you share a little bit about Homecoming Farms? And I'm going to, as you prepare your comments, I'm going to just share with our listeners today. I'm going to give you, ladies and gentlemen, complete disclosure. I said, a little farm that has a CSA program. And then I met Elizabeth and Jody, and I learned this is so much more. There are so many levels and streams here that what I thought was going to be probably a 15-minute get to know you conversation, I think we were on for an hour because I just kept asking question after question. So Elizabeth, share a little bit about Homecoming Farms and how this got established and the mission first.
Well, Homecoming Farm is on the land of the Sisters of St. Dominic in Amityville, and we're what's known as a sponsored ministry. So the sisters provide the land to us, they provide an office to us, computer system, but everything else is up to us. So we run the farm. So the farm is a CSA, which is a community-supported agriculture project. The CSA movement has been around since the Second World War ended, began in Japan. And really the whole focus of it was to know the face of the farmer. So it's a way to integrate the life of the members of the farm into the actual farm itself. So you begin the year, before it begins, people sign up for membership. We have approximately 80 shares that are met by families. And what you do is one of the taglines is you share in the risk and the reward of supporting a farmer. So that's kind of the base of what a CSA is and where we begin. But the farm is really the jewel of the work that we do. Because if we did not have this farm, we would be going around with a PowerPoint presentation telling people that we believe that we're one community of life. But when you're actually able to come to the farm, you get to experience that. So we run educational programs. So we welcome anywhere from little kids to young adults in college to teachers who come for programming with us.
So I'm going to
mentored
jump
over-
in for a
Yes.
second. So we have the farm has a CSA program. So for those of you not familiar with CSA, it's when you contribute, right? You buy a share and you receive, is it weekly or bi-monthly?
It depends. Some people want to come every week. Some people come every other week. And our particular CSA is certified organic by NOFA New York. So that means we don't use any chemical herbicides, pesticides, fungicides. Everything is grown as naturally and as healthily as possible because we are committed to protecting not only the food, but also the soil, the microbes in the soil, the water that's underneath us, because on Long Island, we have an aquifer, which is where we get our water source that we drink. So we have a very strong consciousness that this farm is a place of health and beauty and nourishment. So that's,
we have the
go ahead.
CSA. So people who sign up, your 80 members,
Right.
walk away with a box or a crate or whatever, a variety of vegetables
That's
that
right.
they could then use.
That's correct.
They volunteer at the farm, correct?
That part of their share membership is that they give 15 hours across the whole span of the weeks. So we begin usually the second week in June. We end the last week in October. And across that time, you give 15 hours of service. Most people come an hour early on a pickup day. They go out into the field. They either help harvest, they help plant, they help weed, and that's how they stay committed to the farm. Because God bless the CSAs that deliver the food. We don't do that. We want people to actually come to our farm and actually experience it. So when, I started to talk before that, you share in the risk and the reward of the farm. Well, the reward, of course, is the relationships and the food. But the risk of the farm is, you don't know what's going to grow. You don't know if we're going to have an infestation. You don't know if we're going to have what we had this year, a very serious drought. You don't know about any of that. That's going to impact on the food that you get. But if you come to the farm, you will understand it because you'll see it and you'll talk to the farmer and you'll know it. So that's one level.
So that's one level. Then we have education. Jody, can you share with us a little bit about the education levels that Homecoming Farm offers the community and the surrounding neighborhoods?
Only secondhand, because Elizabeth is in charge of most of the educational programs, along with Sister Jean Clark, who founded the farm. The ways that I've been involved in education, one of the good projects we've done is to participate in the Lost Ladybug project at Cornell, where a ladybug that is a native of New York and is the state insect actually has become locally extinct. Cornell University has a lab where they were raising some that they found, and we were reintroducing them to the farm. So the educational part of that involved having children and parents and anyone who wanted to come and help us release the ladybugs into this organic farm environment, which should be sustainable for them. It should be suitable for them. And so year after year, people would come and help us release these ladybugs. And we don't know yet that they're established again, but the hope is that they are, and they're just quietly there. So that's a program that I was involved in. But Elizabeth does a lot of the, there are other kinds and all sorts of kids who come to the farm, and groups and Boy Scouts. The list is endless. We have corporations who come to the farm, and part of the learning is just going out and knowing how to weed among the plants that are important, beans or radishes or whatever.
And Elizabeth, I know another layer is some of the work you do on contributing food to various other organizations. Can you share a little bit about that layer of Homecoming Farm?
Sure. So if you're a member and you have a share, you come, whether it's every week or every other week, and there's a board up. And on the board, we have listed what your share is for that particular pickup. So you might come one week and you're going to get 6 quarts of tomatoes, 3 eggplant, 4 cucumbers, some greens, and it varies as the season changes. You're very much in tune with the season because your food reflects what grows at that time. Now, we work very closely with an organization called the Interfaith Nutrition Network, the IN. And
So it's
IN,
called
is
Interfaith. So I just want to make sure.
Yes,
Interfaith
Nutrition
Network, referred to as IN,
as the
INN.
IN, exactly.
The IN. Okay,
The
great.
Inn, right. Very well known on Long Island. They have an incredible, the Mary Brennan in Hempstead is where their soup kitchen is. I think they're in their 35th year. And they've now expanded to be like us, layers of service and giving that go on there. Our primary connection is we share food with them. And so what this means is that while it's lovely to get this nice little selection of food, that's not really what they need. They need 100 pounds of tomatoes at one time because they feed sometimes anywhere from 300 to 500 people can show up at their door looking for food. And so if there's an excess of the food that we give them, they also have a pantry. They can provide food to them, like they can get these beautiful or certified organic, locally grown, absolutely fresh tomatoes. They get to take them. So the Inn is one group that gets to partake in our food. And because we provide this food in bulk to them, this means it gives them some extra income for something else they may need to purchase because we've provided it to them. Then there's a secondary group who are actually another sponsored ministry like we are. The sisters run this group called the Opening Word. They've been, I think they're in their probably close to 30th year. And they work with immigrant women from all over the world who are in need of computer skills, English skills, citizenship skills, life skills, mental health skills. They provide a whole range of services. And during the pandemic, I got to really know Jillian Kessinger, who is their executive director, like me. And we were talking, and she talked about because they were not able to meet in their classroom, they got tablets for everyone, which actually was a good thing. They got to really get very sophisticated on these tablets, but there was
they were able to develop their technology skills as their other skills that they were learning.
Right. But they also, it opened a door for a greater sense of how the women live and the struggles, even though they all knew them, the organization knew them. One day, Jillian told me a story about one day she went to a woman, she met her, she lives in a basement and she has a hot plate. And I'm saying a basement, not a basement apartment, or a basement. And the women are very proud and don't share their needs easily or openly. And Jillian gently asked her what she was going to have for dinner. And she said she had nothing. And luckily, because Jillian had been going around trying to provide food during the pandemic, picking food up at the pantries that make it available, she said, well, I have a bag of rice and a can of tomatoes in my car. Would you like them? And the woman started to cry and said, yes. And she said, I didn't know that I would have dinner tonight. And so when Jillian told me that story, my heart just broke. And I thought, we need to find a way to get the food to you as well. And so for the last 2 years, we've now been designating once a week. They come and one of the social worker from their organization, and we provide food. She fills up bags and she brings bags of food to those women. And so what's beautiful about this, especially now with the pandemic having waned, we don't know what's going to happen, but they're seeing the farm, they're seeing the food, and they know that it's for them too. And so that's another layer of what we do of providing, because the thing I like to make really clear about this is we treat them as members. They get the same quality food that our paying members get. You know, Don, our farmer, might call up Jean Victor at the inn and say, listen, I have a whole bunch of tomatoes. They've got bruises on them. Are you interested in them? I'll include them if you want them, because we know that provides more work. You know, you provide seconds. You got to have somebody in a kitchen cleaning them up and getting them ready to use them. He never says no. He always says yes. But we want to respect that we're saying they are worthy of our best. And then someone who can transform maybe our seconds into our best, we want them to have that too. And if I could just share this, could I share this one thing with you? Because I think it's really critically important to this idea of food pantries and sharing food. When I first started doing this with the inn, I would tell people that the inn members were still members of our farm, and they were partaking of our food, and that every person who needed to come to the farm, you know, that came to the farm to help us, every volunteer, every one of them, they were actually helping to serve the hungry. What I think is really important for people to understand is that the food that we provide to the inn, the food we provide to the opening word, we treat them as if they are members of our farm. And so if we have, you know, a bunch of tomatoes that are all bruised and not in such great shape, but could be cleaned up and used in a sauce, we call Jean Victor at the inn and we say, would you like them? He never says no, but we need to make sure that they can use them, because it's another layer of work to add to their plate. And they've always taken our seconds, but that's not what they get. They get the same quality that our shares do. So for years,
so they're getting equal quality. And when there's excess or we have proof, there's an additional opportunity to share forward, is what I'm hearing.
Correct.
And so you has an opportunity to be more generous in giving. So Homecoming Farms, which is a place of running a nonprofit, is also what I'm loving about this organization, is how you're collaborating with other nonprofits and other organizations. And so often we think about nonprofits, well, if I'm going to give here, that's what I can do. If I could show up here, that's all it is. And people think sometimes nonprofits are competing versus collaborating. And I thought one of the greatest examples of Homecoming Farms, as I continue to learn about it, is a beautiful example of how the area and realm of nonprofits collaborate behind the scenes to show up and represent more and more. So I have to tell you, I'm completely in awe of that.
And so in a sense, when you support Homecoming Farm, you are indirectly supporting two other nonprofits, because we are sharing and working together. We're not in isolation from each other. And what I always tell someone who, and I've done this for years, is that when you come to our farm as a volunteer and you help us weed, or you help us plant, or you help us do anything that's related to the farm, you actually not only support us, you are supporting those other nonprofits, and that you are the silent guest at every table. Because one of the things about food and the culture we live in is we don't know really where our food comes from. We don't, unless you like live in an area where you have farms around you and you know you got your potatoes from this farmer down the road or your beans from another one, you don't really know where your food comes from. You get most of it from a supermarket. Here, that you know where our food is coming from, and we know where some of our food is going. And I always say, so you are the silent guest at their table. But in the last year, really in the last months, what I've come to reflect upon in this process is that not every person who gets our food has a table. Some of them are homeless. And so now there's a deeper level of what you're actually doing, because they share in our food, they share in our presence, and we're with them. And we like to say our food is grown with love and given with love and received with love. That love is with that person. And you don't know that, and you don't know who they are, but you're there.
So I have to ask, okay, because, you know, I'll always say nonprofits take all kinds of people, right? To move it forward, to expand the mission, to raise the funds, to build the capital, make the difference. Jody, I have to ask, you're a scientist, you're a brilliant woman. What drove you not to just, maybe sign up for a CSA, but actually drove you to get involved on the board of directors?
Well, as a scientist, my goal was to be useful, to be helpful to people and solve problems. And I had a volunteer side gig after 9/11, which I stopped doing because of many reasons, but I wanted to fill my time with something more appropriate for my interests. And the farm was there. So I became a CSA member and I became a working member of the farm, which was extremely fulfilling and fun. And then Elizabeth and I talked a lot, and I feel like I get the philosophy of the farm, the reason it's here, and she asked me to become part of the board. And this is the first board I've ever been a part of, so it was new. And then there's a need for a director, and I might be one of the most neutral people because I'm a scientist. So I think that's maybe why I became the board director, and I'm honored to be part of that. So
I love that. And yes, a scientist is the neutral vote, and it's important when you're leading a group of people. Elizabeth, on your background, were you always in nonprofits, or is this something new in your life in the last few years?
I have had a somewhat interesting background of a combination of nonprofit and education. I was a florist. I had my own business in Manhattan, a very successful party and special events company in Tribeca. And then my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she was still relatively young. And my sister and I, who ran the business together, decided we had to come home and take care of her. And so I refer to it as the year from hell when
That's fair.
my mother was in the late stages of Alzheimer's. My sister, who was in her 30s, was diagnosed with an extremely aggressive form of breast cancer. And I actually read an article about Sister Jean Clark and this little farm in Amityville. And you're kind of grasping for straws to make sense out of what's happening in your life. And I thought, we need to become part of this farm. And that's really how I started as a member. The interesting thing about it is, one of the things that I really loved to do as a member, I used to love to be the one to help sort all the vegetables out and sort them by color and sort them by size. And it was almost like arranging flowers for me.
That makes sense.
So it makes sense, really. And while my mother was a beautiful gardener and had a beautiful garden, as her world was shrinking due to her disease, my sister got very interested in the idea of organic growing. So this organic thing sort of came in. I found this organic farm we became members of. And then one day I was telling my cousin about this, that this makes perfect sense. This is in blood. I said, what do you mean it's in my blood, Jack? And he said, because that's what Pop used to do. He used to get his job sorting vegetables, because my grandfather was a labor leader, and he actually organized the Fruit and Vegetable Packers Union in New York City.
It comes full circle.
So it comes full circle. And what I realized in that is that it's actually full circle for all of us, because if you go back far enough, we all come from farmers. Farmers.
So I love this. And, the listeners of her success story, if you follow me on social media personally, I'm a weekend gardener during the summer. And it's almost a little comical, because as we're recording this, I took out of my freezer eggplant that I had grown, sauce that I had made out of my garden to make dinner tonight. And I think it's very important to learn and continue to educate ourselves around our land, around how we can live in a good way that benefits all. And I think Homecoming Farm is a great example of the various layers to get involved in your local communities, to get involved in various different organizations. If you love to cook, if you love your vegetables, join a CSA. If you are, and do the research, learn about your local farms and how it's contributing to your population and your community. Homecoming Farm is a beautiful example of a farm that is not just a farm and not just a CSA. It's a farm that's giving forward, working in collaboration with a variety of different nonprofits. So Elizabeth and Jody, thank you for joining me here today at Her Success Story.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much.
having us.
Thank you.
And, continue with the great work you're doing and share with our listeners, how can they check out Homecoming Farm and learn more about the organization, the mission, and its reach?
I think probably if you go to our website, you'll get a sense of how comprehensive the work is that we do there. And we are at homecomingearth.org. And you will learn about the CSA. You will, if you're somebody local who wants to join next season, you'll find a way to do that. And you'll also, if you're somebody who has a group that might like to come and participate at our farm for a day or a program, you can find out about how to do that as well, or to make a donation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And remember, listeners, if you did not catch all of that, the links are in the show notes below. If you are not local, it is okay. It gives you the opportunity to see how this is done and then learn in your communities how you could participate, contribute, or volunteer. Thank you for joining us today at Her Success Story and our nonprofit series. If something resonated with you, if you have a takeaway, something like, oh, that was really interesting, drop it in the show notes. Let's see what you have to say. If you're going to take an action around that, take it. I love that people just pop in to listen, but it's great when we have those takeaways and they create action items. Lastly, if this episode really resonated with you, share it forward, share it to your community, and subscribe. Listen to all the nonprofit series. We have a great group of nonprofit leaders this year, and it is a joy to be part of. Thank you, and we will see you next week.